Rex had once been the pride of the police force, a German shepherd with muscles built for running, jaws strong enough to take down criminals, and eyes that glowed with intelligence and loyalty. But his greatest strength was not his body, it was his heart. From the moment he was chosen as a canine recruit, Rex had shown a kind of dedication that trainers rarely saw, obeying commands without hesitation, protecting his handler with unshakable instinct, and throwing himself into danger, without a second thought if it meant saving lives. On the streets, his reputation grew. Criminals who once thought they could escape suddenly found themselves cornered by a blur of black and tan fur, teeth flashing, bark booming like thunder. When Rex worked, he wasn't just a dog, he was a partner, a soldier, a silent guardian who made people feel safer just by being there. His handler, Officer Davis, treated him like family, feeding him by hand, praising him after every mission, even letting him sleep inside his house rather than leaving him in the cold kennels. Together, they were unstoppable. They chased down armed robbers, sniffed out hidden stashes of drugs, and once even tracked a lost child through miles of thick forest, finding the boy just before nightfall. Rex was celebrated, a hero in his own right. Yet he never cared for medals or applause. All he cared about was following Davis, standing at his side, doing the work he had been trained to do, and loving the man who had become his whole world. But one tragic night changed everything. During a drug raid that went terribly wrong, Officer Davis was shot and killed in the line of duty. Rex fought to reach him, barking, pulling against his leash, trying to drag him out of danger, but it was too late. Davis was gone. Rex's howls echoed into the night, piercing the hearts of everyone who heard them. The department decided that Rex, now without his handler, should be retired. He had served enough, they said. He was strong still, but his spirit was broken, his eyes clouded with grief. With Davis gone, Rex no longer fit neatly into their system. He was sent away, first to a temporary kennel, then to a crowded animal shelter, where his story as a decorated canine officer meant little. There, in the rows of barking dogs, Rex became just another number, just another case file in a drawer filled with forgotten names. The shelter staff did what they could. They cleaned his cage, fed him, even patted his head now and then, but none of it replaced what he had lost. Rex stopped eating as much. He stopped barking. He stopped caring. Each day he would lie on the cold concrete floor, staring at the wall, his body stiff, his breathing slow, as if waiting for something or someone that would never come. When people visited the shelter, they passed his cage quickly. Families wanted puppies, playful dogs who bounced and wagged their tails. Children pointed to bright-eyed beagles or golden retrievers with tongues lolling happily. No one wanted the old German shepherd with scars on his body and sorrow in his eyes. He was limping slightly from an old injury that never fully healed, and his coat had lost the shine it once had. Two old people would mutter, "Too tired." Some shook their heads and walked on. Even the workers whispered sadly that, if he wasn't adopted soon, his days were numbered. And so, Rex waited. He waited as days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. He waited as younger dogs came and went, carried off in happy arms while his cage remained locked. He waited in silence, enduring the noise of barking all around him, the sharp smell of disinfectant, the chill of the concrete at night. Yet deep inside, buried under the weight of loneliness, there was still a flicker of the old Rex the warrior. The guardian, the dog who had once run into danger without hesitation. He didn't know it, but his greatest mission was still ahead of him. Though abandoned, though broken, though left to die in a place where hope often disappeared, fate was quietly moving pieces into place, preparing to bring into his life a little girl who would see past his scars, past his pain, and recognize the hero still waiting inside, across town, in a quiet little neighborhood where the sound of children's laughter often echoed through the streets. There lived a girl named Emily, whose life had never been simple or carefree like the children, who played tag in the park or raced their bicycles down the hill. Emily was small for her age, with delicate hands and a face that seemed to carry both innocence and wisdom. But behind her gentle smile was a battle that had defined her short life. Emily was born with a heart condition, one that made even simple activities like running, climbing stairs, or even playing for too long dangerous and exhausting. Her mother watched over her constantly, fearful that one misstep could bring harm to her fragile daughter. Emily spent much of her childhood indoors, watching from her bedroom window as other children laughed and shouted in the sunlight. Dreamed of joining them, of running without fear, of playing until her cheeks turned red, but instead, she stayed close to her mother, surrounded by books, dolls, and her own quiet imagination. Her father worked long hours, trying to keep up with hospital bills, so the house often felt still and heavy, filled with the weight of unspoken worries. Emily's mother noticed the sadness growing in her little girl, the loneliness that lingered in her eyes even when she smiled. She tried everything: games, painting, even trips to the park where they sat quietly on benches. But nothing seemed to break through Emily's sense of isolation. What Emily wanted most wasn't a new toy or another doctor visit. She wanted a friend, someone who wouldn't treat her like she was fragile. Someone who would love her unconditionally and never leave her side. One Saturday afternoon, after a particularly difficult doctor's appointment, where Emily had to sit still for long, uncomfortable tests, her mother decided it was time to try something different. Something that might bring light back into her daughter's world. She gently suggested they visit the animal shelter, just to look. Emily's eyes lit up with a cautious excitement. She had always loved animals, especially dogs, though she had never been allowed to have one because of her health. Her mother thought perhaps a gentle companion could fill the quiet spaces of Emily's life, give her something to love and care for, and most importantly, give her hope. When they arrived at the shelter, Emily's small hand clutched her mother's tightly. The air inside was filled with the sound of barking, the kind of excited, desperate chorus only kennels could create. Dogs of every size and color pressed against the bars, tails wagging, tongues hanging out, each one begging for a chance to be chosen. Emily walked slowly down the row, her wide eyes scanning each cage. Some dogs jumped wildly, pawing at the metal as if to say, "Pick me, pick me." Others whined softly, their eyes pleading. Emily paused at several cages, smiling at the energetic puppies and wagging tails. But something inside her told her none of these were the friend she was looking for. Then, at the very end of the row, she saw him. Rex. He didn't bark, didn't jump, didn't wag his tail like the others. He just sat there, his head lowered, his body still, his eyes steady and deep. For a moment, Emily forgot about the noise around her. She forgot about her weak heart and the warnings from doctors and the constant fear of getting sick. All she saw were his eyes, tired, scarred, but gentle, with a kind of sadness that strangely mirrored her own. She stepped closer to the bars, crouched down, and whispered softly, "Hi there." Rex slowly lifted his head, sniffed the air. And then, as if recognizing something familiar in this fragile little girl, he pressed his nose carefully against the bars. Emily's small hand reached out, her fingers brushing against his fur. In that quiet moment, something unspoken passed between them, an understanding, a bond forming silently and instantly, as if fate had been holding its breath, waiting for this connection. Emily turned to her mother, her eyes shining for the first time in weeks. "That one," she said firmly. The shelter worker nearby hesitated. "Sweetheart, he's old. He's been through a lot. He's not the best choice for a child." Emily didn't even blink. "He's perfect," she whispered. Her mother looked at Rex, at his scars, his limp, his tired frame, and then at her daughter, who was now hugging the bars like she never wanted to let go. For the first time in a long while, she saw true joy on Emily's face. Against all warnings, against logic, against the doubts that whispered this might be a mistake, she agreed. That day, Rex left the shelter with Emily, not knowing that he had just found his greatest mission yet. And Emily walked out with her first true friend, not realizing how this dog would one day save her life in the most extraordinary way imaginable. Rex had only been in Emily's home for a few weeks, but it felt as if he had always belonged there, as though some invisible thread had pulled him from the cold shelter floor straight into the warm little world of this fragile child, who needed him just as much as he needed her. He followed her everywhere, padding quietly behind her as she moved from room to room, settling down at her feet when she colored in her books, curling beside her bed every night as she drifted to sleep. Emily would often wrap her tiny arms around his neck and whisper secrets into his ear, things she never told anyone else, her fears of being different from other kids, her dreams of one day running freely without doctors telling her to slow down, her quiet prayers for someone to stay with her forever. Rex listened with the patience of a saint, his tail sometimes thumping against the floor in soft acknowledgement, his tired eyes watching her with a tenderness that seemed to heal her heart more than any medicine could. Her mother, though still cautious, saw how the dog brought color back into her daughter's life, how Emily laughed more, smiled more, and seemed lighter, as if a heavy weight had been lifted simply by the presence of this loyal companion. But no one could have guessed that Rex's return to duty, his greatest mission yet, was waiting just beyond the horizon of an ordinary evening. It was a stormy night. The kind of night where rain hammered the windows and the wind howled through the cracks, rattling the old house with eerie moans. Lightning slashed across the sky, followed by rolling thunder that made Emily clutch her blanket tighter as Rex lay beside her bed, ever watchful, his ears flicking at every rumble. Downstairs, her mother tried to distract herself with a book. But the storm made her uneasy, the shadows flickering across the walls like restless ghosts. Then it happened. Somewhere in the house, an electrical fault sparked, a small flame catching on dry wood. Within minutes, smoke began to curl through the air, faint at first, then thicker, darker, more menacing. Emily's mother smelled it just as she heard the faint crackle of fire. Her heart seized in terror as she leaped to her feet, rushing toward the stairs, but her path was already blocked by flames licking upward, devouring the old wood with a hunger that spread faster than she could comprehend. "Emily," she screamed, her voice breaking, but the only answer was the roar of fire as smoke filled the house. Panic clawed at her chest as she realized her daughter was trapped upstairs with no way for her to reach. Her upstairs, Rex was already on his feet, barking with a ferocity Emily had never heard before, his instincts firing with the precision of a soldier back on the battlefield. He nudged Emily urgently, barking louder, pawing at her blanket until she coughed herself awake, eyes watering from the thickening smoke. "Rex," she cried weakly, clutching him, as the room filled with the acrid burn of smoke that stung her throat. He barked again, this time grabbing the edge of her blanket in his teeth, pulling with surprising strength for his tired frame, urging her to move. Emily coughed and stumbled, disoriented, but Rex pressed against her side, guiding her toward the door even as the hallway beyond glowed with firelight and falling embers. His legs trembled under the weight of his body and hers, but he refused to falter. Every nerve in his body screamed with the heat, his lungs burned with smoke, but his training and his heart carried him forward. Emily clung to his fur, tears streaking her soot-stained face as she whispered, "Please, Rex, don't leave me." He wouldn't, not now, not ever. The hallway was a tunnel of fire, beams cracking, debris falling dangerously close. At one point, a burning plank fell from the ceiling, striking Rex's back. He yelped in pain but pressed his body over Emily's, shielding her from the blow, refusing to let her be harmed. His old legs nearly buckled, but he pushed forward, dragging her inch by inch, barking desperately between coughs, signaling to anyone who might hear. Downstairs, firefighters burst into the house, their boots pounding against the floor, their shouts cutting through the roar of fire. Guided by Rex's barking, they rushed upstairs and found the poor Emily clinging to Rex. Rex still pulling her despite his own collapsing strength. With practiced speed, they scooped Emily into safe arms, carrying her toward fresh air. But as they turned, Rex collapsed onto the smoke-blackened floor, his chest heaving, eyes dimming, his strength finally spent after giving everything he had left. He had not only protected her, he had carried her, shielded her, fought for her life as if she were the only mission that ever mattered. And as Emily cried out for him, the firefighters lifted his heavy body too, refusing to leave behind the dog who had clearly saved the little girl against impossible odds. The news spread like wildfire, faster than anyone could have imagined. The kind of story that leaped from a local headline to national recognition almost overnight. Because there was something so profoundly moving about the image of an old, forgotten police dog dragging a fragile little girl through smoke and flames, refusing to surrender even when his own body was failing. Reporters crowded outside the hospital where Emily was recovering, their cameras flashing as her mother clutched her daughter's hand and spoke through tears about the dog who had saved her child's life. "We owe everything to Rex," she said, her voice breaking with emotion. And those words traveled across airwaves and screens, touching the hearts of millions who suddenly saw in this battered German shepherd not just a dog, but a hero, a symbol of loyalty and love that refused to die, even when the world had turned its back on him. Social media lit up with photos of Rex lying weak but alive in the veterinary clinic, his fur singed, his body bandaged, yet his eyes still holding that same quiet strength, and comments poured in from every corner of the country, people thanking him, people crying, people promising never to overlook an older dog again. Donations flooded the shelter that had once considered him too old to be wanted, enough money to care not only for Rex but for dozens of other animals like him. Children in schools wrote letters and drew pictures of Rex with a medal around his neck, some writing in shaky handwriting, "Thank you for being brave," others calling him a superhero. When Rex was well enough to stand again, the police department that had once retired him too early decided to honor him properly. In a ceremony attended by officers, firefighters, reporters, and neighbors, Rex was brought onto the stage wearing a shiny new collar, his coat cleaned, his body still stiff but his head held high. Emily, wearing a little white dress, stood beside him, her small hand gripping his fur as though she would never let go. The police chief spoke of Rex's years of service, his courage in the field, and his final act of heroism that had saved a child's life, then gently placed a medal around his neck. The crowd rose to their feet, clapping, cheering, some wiping away tears as Rex simply stood there, ears perked, tail wagging faintly, his old eyes glistening with a mixture of pride and quiet humility. He didn't know what the applause meant, but he understood Emily's touch, her embrace, her whispered words into his ear. "You're my hero, Rex." That was all he needed. The story continued to inspire for weeks and months after, appearing on talk shows, in magazines, even in school assemblies where teachers told students about the dog, who had been abandoned and yet became a hero when it mattered most. Animal shelters across the nation reported an increase in adoptions of older dogs, people saying they had been touched by Rex's story and wanted to give another forgotten animal a chance at love. For Emily, life was forever changed too. She no longer felt quite so fragile, because she knew she had someone who had faced down fire itself to keep her safe. Someone who slept at the foot of her bed every night, as if guarding her dreams. Her doctors noticed a difference as well. Her spirits lifted, her determination to grow stronger became fiercer, as though Rex's courage had passed into her own little heart. She told anyone who would listen that she and Rex were a team, that he had saved her, and now it was her turn to save him. And she kept that promise, making sure he had the best food, the softest bed, endless cuddles, and all the love he had been denied for so long, though Rex's body bore scars and his movements remained slow. He no longer carried the weight of loneliness or abandonment. He was no longer just a retired canine discarded in a shelter. He was Emily's guardian, her best friend, her miracle. And as the years passed, whenever people stopped them on the street to say, "Is that the hero dog?" Emily would smile proudly and answer, "Yes, this is Rex," before kneeling down to hug him tightly, whispering again and again, "You saved me, and I'll love you forever." Rex's journey, from forgotten to celebrated, from broken to beloved, became a reminder etched into the hearts of millions that no one is ever too old, too scarred, or too forgotten to make a difference, and that sometimes the greatest heroes are the ones the world has already given up on.